That's not a parking spot, that's my driveway. Those are the words I had to say after staring for 14 days at that matte black Porsche blocking my garage, just sitting there like it owned the place. I'm Carver Langston. I'm 57 now, and I've spent most of my adult life restoring yachts that were worth more than most folks' homes, so I know a thing or two about taking things apart. And more importantly, I know how to document every last step. What happened next, though? Well, it turned my quiet little coastal neighborhood upside down and taught one entitled family that expensive toys don't grant immunity from consequences. Some folks said what I did was unhinged, but me, I just called it professional obstruction removal. You ever have someone block your driveway for 2 weeks straight? Drop a comment. Tell me what you do. It started at 7:42 on a Tuesday morning, just me and a cooling mug of coffee staring at that black Porsche 911 GT3. That was day 4, mind you. The sun was coming up, casting long shadows over the matte finish. You could hear the faint ticking of the engine cooling down, which meant whoever parked it had just ducked into the big house across the street right on schedule. That car didn't just sit there, it squatted like a middle finger made out of German engineering and matte black arrogance. Glossy black wheels, windows so dark you'd think they were hiding government secrets, and an attitude that screamed, "I have money and I don't care about anyone else." I'd seen plenty of expensive toys in my line of work, believe me. To me, this was just another one parked exactly where it had no right to be. Thing is, my driveway's not just a slab of concrete, it's my sanctuary. I'd lived in that modest rancher for 25 years, kept the garage behind that Porsche as my workshop, my sacred little space. My wife Lana, she used to paint boats in there on rainy days, catching the soft light through the windows. She'd been gone 3 years, but I kept that place sacred, clean ordered. Always open, always ready. Oakmont Hills. Our neighborhood was the kind of coastal suburb where houses sat close. Everyone had a view of the harbor if they craned their neck just right. The HOA here cared a whole lot about mailbox colors and lawn length, but apparently parking violations were a different story. My house, simple, well-maintained, paid for with honest work down at the marina and fixing up boats for folks who could afford them. Across the street, though, you had the Kensington Estate, a mansion in every sense, all glass and white panels screaming wealth. The Kensingtons were old shipping money. Dear Kensington, mid-50s, had inherited a seat on her grandfather's shipping board and ruled our HOA like a personal fiefdom. 3 terms as president, everyone knew her, and most people knew not to cross her. Her son Thatcher was 25 trust fund Porsche 911 GT3, a kid who acted like his car proved something about who he was. I met Dira the first day the Porsche showed up. I walked over, knocked, tried to be neighborly. She opened the door in her yacht club, best looking at me like I'd just interrupted something vital. "Mrs. Kensington, your son's car is blocking my driveway. Would you mind asking him to move it?" She smiled that special smile. You know, the one the kind wealthy folks use when they're being condescending. "Oh, Mr. Langston boys will be boys. He'll move it eventually. He's terribly busy with his ventures, you understand." I didn't understand, not at all. All I knew was there was a $150,000 sports car parked where my truck needed to be, and eventually wasn't the timeline I agreed to, but I nodded, thanked her, and walked back to my house. Day 2, I left a note on the windshield. Polite professional. "Please move your vehicle. This is a private driveway. Thank you." When I came back from my morning walk, the note was torn in half on the ground and there was a fresh oil stain on my concrete. Day 3, I called the non-emergency police line. The officer who came was sympathetic but well limited. "Sir, this is a private property dispute, civil matter. You'll need to pursue other remedies." Other remedies, right? On the 4th morning, the garage door stayed shut. Lana's easel caught no light. That night, I squeezed my truck onto the street just to get in. Sat among my tools, 3 decades worth of precision instruments hanging on pegboard. I documented whole yacht surveys, written condition reports that insurance companies used as gold standards, testified about proper restoration in million-dollar cases. I documented everything so it stood up for claims and reputation alike. This wasn't about parking, not really. It was about boundaries. It was about not taking what isn't yours, about respecting property rights and not assuming your wealth makes you exempt from basic decency. Lana used to say I had a strong sense of fairness, maybe too strong, but she'd never let anyone push her around, and neither would I. I gave Thatcher Kensington 7 more days to do the right thing. 7 days to show he understood courtesy, what we call right-of-way in maritime circles. 7 days to prove that wealth hadn't totally destroyed his ability to function in a community. I should have known better. For the next 10 days, he ignored every certified letter, every photograph I took. By day 14, my file on the incident read like a legal case. People like the Kensingtons don't get the idea of right-of-way. They think they own every waterway, every road, every driveway, that mine and yours are concepts that bend to their convenience. I'd seen yacht owners like that, the kind who buy a 50-foot cruiser and expect the marina to rearrange everything for their schedule, who damage equipment and blame the crew who think money's a substitute for competence or consideration. But here's what I knew that they didn't. I'd spent 3 decades taking apart complex machines and putting them back together better than new. I knew every fastener, every torque spec, every order for disassembly. And a Porsche 911 GT3, for all its engineering, is just another machine. Machines can be disassembled legally, methodically, professionally. All it takes is the right tools, proper documentation, and knowing what's permanent damage versus temporary component separation. I wasn't going to break the law. I was going to outdo, out-evidence, and outmaneuver them with procedures they never saw coming. Maritime salvage protocols for landlocked property. Professional survey standards for automotive obstruction. A methodical, reversible disassembly, every step documented, justified, and legally defensible. That Porsche sat in my driveway for 14 days. 14 days of me building a case that'd make a federal investigation look casual. That's what professionals do. We don't get mad, we get methodical. When those 14 days were up, that Porsche was going to teach the Kensington family a lesson about boundaries. Day 4, still no movement. So I installed a dash cam in my truck, the kind I'd used as a maritime surveyor. GPS timestamps, wide-angle coverage. Evidence speaks. I called the HOA hotline, left a measured message vehicle blocking my driveway 4 days running, requesting assistance. 6 hours later, a board member called back, promised to look into it. Nothing happened. The Porsche didn't budge. Coastal dew collected on its matte paint like it was marking territory. Day 5, I finally met Thatcher. I was checking my mail when I heard an expensive engine, an Audi SUV, probably borrowed. Thatcher hopped out in designer sailing clothes that had never touched saltwater AirPods and scrolling his phone. He wore money like a uniform. I waited until he noticed me took him longer than it should have. Finally, he pulled out an AirPod, annoyed. "Excuse me, your Porsche has blocked my driveway 5 days now. I need you to move it." He looked at me like I'd just asked him to solve quantum physics and said, "Dude, chill. It's just a parking spot. My garage is being renovated." I told him as calmly as I could that it wasn't a parking spot. It was my driveway, and he was trespassing. The marina lot was 2 blocks away if he needed a place for his car. He said, "Whatever old man shoved his AirPod back in," and told me to take it up with his mom if it bothered me. He walked off mid-conversation like I was some waiter he'd just dismissed. I watched him disappear into the mansion, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, just the kind of professional detachment I'd learned surveying yacht damage after storms. Day 6. Deira showed up at my door carrying artisan bread from the yacht club wrapped with a ribbon. Her smile was all charity, gala, warm on the surface, calculating underneath. She said we should talk neighbor to neighbor, that there'd been some confusion about parking. I told her no confusion. Her son's car blocked my driveway 6 days. Asked him, contacted the HOA? Still there. Her smile tightened. She launched into a speech about neighbors, flexibility, how ships adjust course. We bend and accommodate, that's what community means. Friendly words, not so friendly tone. There was an edge, a subtle threat wrapped in yacht club pleasantries. I told her I understood luxury but also property lines and that her son's vehicle needed to move. This wasn't negotiable. The smile vanished. She informed me this community had certain standards. Her husband sailed with the mayor every Sunday, was close with the Commodore, that she'd hate for me to find myself on the wrong side of community standards over something so trivial as parking. She left the bread anyway. I left it there for an hour, then threw it away. Felt important not to accept even expensive carbs from her. The threat was clear step out of line and the Kensington social machine would roll over me. Old money protecting new money's bad behavior. Day 7. I called a towing company, the same pros who handled marina impounds. Dispatcher was apologetic but firm, couldn't tow from private property without owner's consent or police authorization. And with a $150,000 Porsche, they wouldn't touch it without paperwork. More paperwork. More documentation. The system was designed to protect the Thatchers of the world, not people whose property they violated. So I started photographing not just phone snapshots, but with my professional camera. Multiple angles, date and timestamps, GPS metadata. Shot the Porsche from my doorway, from the street, from the garage window. Documented the growing oil stain on my concrete. Photographed my truck on the street because my own driveway was occupied. Got the Kensington mansion in the background of every shot just for context. I researched municipal parking codes, property line surveys, maritime law parallels, printed statutes, highlighted sections on obstruction and trespass, right of access. Day 8, neighbors started warning me. Mr. Baxter Strode, retired sailing instructor, asked if that was the Kensington kid's car. When I confirmed it, he shook his head, told me she was vindictive. Last year, the Johnsons put up a fence 6 inches too tall by some bylaw, and she made their lives miserable till they moved. Be careful, he said. Mrs. Will Gardner, an elderly widow, whispered that De'Ara had blacklisted the Hendersons over a tree dispute 3 families had left in 5 years because of her, and she had connections all through the Harbor Commission, Yacht Club, City Council. That was the consensus: be careful. Don't rock the boat. Don't make waves. Let the powerful do as they please and adjust your expectations. Suburban mutiny, but silent. Everyone knew it was wrong, but nobody would speak up because the cost of crossing power was too high. I felt isolated not just because my driveway was blocked, but because my whole community had decided it was better to keep the peace with the Kensingtons than defend basic rights. These were the same folks who'd complain if someone's grass was half an inch too long but say nothing, while a trust fund kid parked a 6-figure car wherever he pleased. The Porsche appeared every morning at 7, sat there till about 11. Then Thatcher would finally head off to the yacht club, gym, or brunch. 4 hours every morning, garage, inaccessible driveway, blocked property, rights trampled. Day 9, I hit my breaking point. I had a consulting call, a restoration job up the coast, time sensitive, valuable. I needed to get tools from my garage, but that black Porsche parked at 6:45 and no one answered their phone or door. My client waited. My reputation hung in the balance. I ended up hiring a cargo van, loading tools through the side door. Awkward, inefficient, cost me $80 and a slice of pride when I showed up at the marina in a rental. Client asked if everything was okay. I lied, said yes while the embarrassment burned. When I got home, Thatcher was out there washing the Porsche in my driveway using my water spigot without permission, detailing supplies spread out like a photo shoot, saying, "This Matty Black shows every smudge hope you don't mind." I minded everything about it but didn't yell. Just walked into my garage and felt something click inside, a shift from frustration to problem solving. The Porsche wasn't an obstacle anymore. It was a project, a problem to be solved systematically. Every component has fasteners. Every system has access points. Every assembly has a sequence. I'd taken apart yacht engines worth millions. This was a car, just another machine. That night in my workshop, surrounded by tools, I didn't sleep much. My mind ran through sequences, visualizing every step. I called my attorney and a licensed recovery service. I thought about maritime salvage law and how it applied right of removal for navigation obstructions, professional survey protocols, legal frameworks for temporary disassembly. By morning, I had a plan, not revenge, but professional, documented, justified, and legal. I'd apply maritime salvage principles to an automotive trespass. Day 10. I drafted a certified letter, professional language, surveyor's precision. I outlined the 14-day timeline, attached printed photos with timestamps, referenced all relevant municipal codes, and CC'd the neighborhood mediator listed on the HOA website. I walked to the post office, paid for signature confirmation, and watched the clerk scan the tracking number. Documentation always. That letter would land in the Kensington mailbox within 48 hours, and this time Dara would have to sign for it herself. No more claiming ignorance, no more brushing it off as a neighborly misunderstanding. 24 hours passed. The Porsche still sat there, but now it had company. One of the yacht club kids' dirt bikes was parked sideways across the foot of my driveway like an extra little insult. 2 vehicles now staking out my property. The message was clear. I'd escalated by going legal, so they escalated by marking more territory. That's how entitled people operate. Push back, and they push harder because in their world, consequences are for other people. I called the police again. Different officer, this time younger, less patient. He looked at the Porsche and the dirt bike, scribbled in his notebook, and gave me the same song and dance about civil remedies, property disputes, and the police not being able to intervene unless there's a threat to safety. I showed him the certified letter, the timeline, the photographs. He was sympathetic in that useless way. He knew I was right, but his hands were tied. He said my only real option was to pursue legal action, which we both knew would mean months of delay and thousands in legal fees, the exact outcome the Kensingtons were counting on. Before the officer could leave, Dara came out of her house already filming on her phone. She was dressed for a performance yacht club blazer, expensive sunglasses, the whole pillar of the community costume. She launched into a speech about how I'd been harassing her son, following him, taking photos, making threats, creating an unsafe environment. She said her family felt targeted, that my aggressive behavior was why communities need strong HOA leadership. The way she said certain neighbors, well, I got the message loud and clear. I stayed calm, pulled out my own phone, and showed the officer my documentation dates, times, certified mail receipts, photographs. He looked between us, got the picture, but told us to work it out like adults. He told De'Ara I documented everything, suggested she move the vehicles to avoid conflict, and warned that blocking a driveway could constitute trespass. She bristled, said her attorney would be very interested in my harassment, and announced she was filing a formal complaint. The dirt bike disappeared within an hour, but the Porsche stayed. They'd give an inch where it didn't matter and hold the line on everything else. That night I started phase 2 of my research. If the system wouldn't help me, I'd help myself within the rules. I read case law, property rights, trespass statutes, something called the doctrine of adverse possession easement law, the legal definition of obstruction. I found precedents where property owners had successfully sued for damages after repeated trespass. Statutes on reasonable use, repeated offenses, the difference between destruction and disassembly. The law made a distinction. Destruction was forbidden, but removal, if reversible and non-destructive, was a different animal entirely. I made an appointment with an attorney. Not just any attorney, a property law specialist with maritime experience. Simone, her name was. Her office was in a converted warehouse by the harbor, all exposed brick and sailboat prints on the wall. I walked in on day 12, handed her 3 file folders so fat she raised her eyebrows. She flipped through my photos, certified letters, timelines, police reports, highlighted codes. When she finished, she leaned back and studied me like she was deciding if I was a genius or just nuts. Mr. Langston, this is the most thorough client documentation I've seen in 30 years of practice. You've got a clear case for trespass, harassment, violation of property rights. We could file suit tomorrow. She paused, then said, but litigation takes months, costs thousands, and people like the Kensingtons weaponize the legal system. They'll countersue, drag it out, burn through your savings just because they can. Old money protects new money's bad behavior by sheer attrition. I told her I understood. Then I asked a hypothetical. What if someone removed an obstruction using professional protocols with no permanent damage? What if every component was cataloged, photographed, stored in climate-controlled conditions, all documented to maritime salvage standards? She listened. I explained not destruction, not theft, but temporary separation, like dry docking a yacht for survey. Everything reversible, everything documented, everything safe. She went quiet, then said, that's creative, unprecedented, and possibly defensible under property law and obstruction removal statutes. The key would be documentation and reversibility. You'd need to exhaust every other remedy first, which you have. You'd need multiple warnings, which you've given. You'd need to show good faith, and you'd need insurance because they'll sue you anyway. I told her my maritime liability insurance was still active. She smiled. Then theoretically, if someone were to professionally disassemble an obstruction after exhausting civil remedies, that person would have a very interesting legal argument. Not guaranteed, but interesting. She told me to keep her informed and document everything. I left her office with her card in a sense that my plan was moving from wild idea to plausible reality. Day 13. Porsche still sat there. Day 14 still there. I sent one last email to both mother and son, certified with red receipt, crystal clear. The vehicle must be removed by this date and time, or I would exercise my property rights to remove the obstruction per municipal code and maritime precedent. Attach the whole timeline. Within an hour, Deira replied CC'd to the HOA board and half the yacht club. She called my email a threat, called me unstable, referenced my maritime nonsense, reminded everyone that we were on landlocked property. She said her family would pursue legal action for harassment and attempted theft, said her husband would get my surveyor's license reviewed. Certain people need to learn their place in this community, she wrote. I read her email twice, saved it in 3 places, forwarded it to my attorney with the note, they still don't understand. Because they didn't. They genuinely believed the rules bent for them, that consequences only happen to other people. I spent that evening making final preparations. By day 14, the anger had cooled into clarity, the calm conviction you get when you know you're right and can prove it. They'd had every chance. Now they were about to learn what 3 decades of professional documentation and precision could accomplish. That a working man with a good file is a force to be reckoned with. Day 15, I started Operation Deconstruction. Not destruction, deconstruction. There's a difference, and that word matters. Deconstruction implies reversibility, methodology standards. I sat at my workbench with a legal pad, sketching out the framework for something nobody'd ever done before applying maritime salvage protocols to a Porsche that had overstayed its welcome by 2 weeks. Property owners have the right to remove obstructions. The method isn't specified, only that it must not cause permanent damage and all other options must be exhausted. I'd given them 14 days. What remained was actual removal, and that's where my expertise kicked in. I'd restored vessels worth millions, every component documented, stored, reassembled to factory spec or better. A Porsche is just a smaller boat, and I knew how to handle it. I started with research. The Porsche GT3 service manual, found it online legally thanks to car enthusiast forums. Spent 2 days studying it, like I used to study yacht blueprints. German engineering is logical. Every piece has an access point. A removal sequence, torque specs. The manual had it all: how the body panels were attached, how the exhaust came off, how to safely remove interior pieces. It was meant for service, so it was meant to come apart and go back together. I made a list. Start with wheels, removing them makes the point instantly. Then body panels, then the exhaust, then interior components, anything that didn't require dealership-only tools or permanent alteration. I cross-referenced each item with the service manual, made notes on the order and the tools. The plan took 3 days to finish, but by the end, I had a workflow that would strip the Porsche to its essential frame, engine, and glass, while keeping every piece intact, cataloged, and preserved. Next, storage logistics. I wasn't about to pile up Porsche parts in my garage that would just invite accusations of theft or damage. I rented a climate-controlled unit, bought archival supplies, mats, tags, numbered labels, every step photographed. Every piece had a paper trail, receipts, photos, video. I called my attorney and walked her through the plan. She listened, then said, "What you're describing is technically legal, removing an obstruction, non-destructive. After all, remedies are exhausted." She wanted me to send one final notice, create a condition report before touching anything, and document every single step: video, photos, GPS metadata. Treat it like a federal investigation, she said. I told her that was my plan all along. I set up 4 cameras, 2 fixed to the garage, 1 on the house, 1 on a tripod. I tested them, checked for blind spots. Every stage would be filmed in 4K with timestamps and GPS data. Any accusation of damage would crumble against the footage. The condition report came next. Before touching a thing, I photographed the Porsche from every angle, wide shots, close-ups of every panel, every trim, every wheel, scratches, stone chips, swirl, marks, the VIN mileage, tires, interior undercarriage. Over 300 photographs. No claim of damage would stand against my record. And yes, the moral calculus weighed on me. Was I becoming what I hated? Someone who ignores proper channels, who acts unilaterally. But I kept coming back to the same answer. I'd exhausted the channels. The system failed because it was built for people like the Kensingtons. What I was doing was enforcing the rules using professional methods that were legal, even if unconventional. I wasn't destroying or stealing. I was temporarily relocating components fully documented to a secure facility with proof they could be returned undamaged. Late one night, I could almost hear Lana's voice. "Don't let them take your peace." She always knew the line between yielding and standing firm. That reminder steadied me. She'd never back down from unfairness. She painted in that garage because it was her right, her boundary. The Kensingtons had taken that for 14 days. Taking it back wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Day 18. 2 days before I planned to begin, I sent the final notice. Certified email, red receipt, detailed and specific vehicle registration number must be removed from the surveyed property at this address by this date and time. Failure to comply will result in obstruction removal and component preservation at owner's expense per municipal code and maritime salvage precedent. All components will be stored safely and returned upon proper vehicle relocation and payment of storage fees. I attached the whole timeline, my photographs, the legal statutes. Professional, documented, unambiguous. The mother's reply was instant CC'd to every person she knew. She called it a threat, called me unstable, said they'd pursue legal action for harassment, for attempted theft, said her husband would have my license reviewed. You don't understand how things work in communities like this. She was right about one thing. I didn't understand how a community could function when wealthy folks got to ignore the rules everyone else had to follow. But I understood documentation. I understood evidence. And I understood that I'd just given them 48 hours of advance notice of exactly what would happen if they didn't move that Porsche. Day 19. I did a final inventory check. Every tool laid out in sequence. Every camera tested. Storage containers labeled and ready. My attorney had my plan in writing. My insurance company notified I'd be doing a vehicle obstruction survey, a licensed towing company on standby for when the stripped frame needed a lift. Every step cleared, every exposure minimized. The difference was only scale and purpose. I wasn't restoring something beautiful. I was removing something that didn't belong. But the methodology, identical, careful, systematic, reversible, comprehensively recorded. That evening I stood in my driveway one last time before the work began. The Porsche sat there in the fading light, matte black paint, looking almost liquid in the sunset. It was a beautiful machine, German engineering at its finest, wasted on someone who used it as a prop for social media and a weapon for claiming space. I felt no anger, just a cold professional assessment. This was a job, documented, justified, methodical, a job that would either teach the Kensingtons about boundaries or hand them a lawsuit, but one that I could defend with pride. 6:47 a.m., day 20. I walked outside in my surveyor vest, the same one I'd worn for 30 years, inspecting yachts, cordless impact wrench in my hand. The morning air was cool, salty from the harbor. The neighborhood was quiet, gulls crying overhead. My 4 cameras blinked red, already recording. Final notice sent, every remedy exhausted, documentation ready. What happened next was simply work professional obstruction removal. I took a breath, knelt beside the front passenger wheel. Porsche's center lock wheels use a single large nut, counterclockwise on one side, clockwise on the other. The impact wrench clicked, the lock loosened, and I slid it off, sealed in a labeled bag, snapped a photo with timestamp and GPS. Then the wheel, 20 inches of matte black aluminum high-performance rubber, came free. I set it on a padded mat, photographed it from 3 angles, tagged it, noted the removal, time, and condition. 1 down, 3 to go. I repeated the process on the front driver wheel, then the rear passenger, then the rear driver. By the time I was done, the Porsche was squatting on its brake rotors, all 4 wheels removed, declawed. The transformation was striking. What had been a symbol of wealth and entitlement now looked awkward, incomplete. I loaded the wheels into my truck for later storage and stood back. A neighbor appeared, retired sailing instructor with his dog. He stopped staring at the Porsche. "Carver, what in the—" I gave a friendly wave, explained. I was removing an obstruction, had documented 14 days of trespass, exhausted civil remedies, and every piece was being stored professionally. He blinked, asked if it was legal. I told him my attorney reviewed everything, and that property owners have the right to remove obstructions using non-destructive methods. He stared, then grinned. "The yacht club is going to lose their minds. Need coffee?" "This is better than TV." I declined the coffee but appreciated the support. He watched as I moved to Phase 2 body panels. Porsche's exteriors held with clips, fasteners, and carefully engineered mounting points. First, the front bumper. I ran my hands along the edge, feeling for the clip locations. Used a composite-safe pry tool, same kind I'd use on a yacht's gel coat. Applied gentle pressure clips, popped bumper, separated, revealing radar sensors and crash structure. Heavier than I expected, but it came away cleanly set on a padded mat, photographed, tagged, documented. The side mirrors were next, tiny but significant. Each one had an electrical connector to be disconnected, no yanking, just careful support of the connector body. I popped the interior door panel, accessed the mounting bolts, disconnected the harness like I'd done 100 times with navigation systems. Both mirrors removed, tagged, stored. Now the Porsche looked stripped, almost vulnerable, deaf and dumb, as my old mechanic used to say. The rear spoiler, the carbon fiber wing pride of the GT3, came off next. Located the bolts concealed under rubber grommets, careful not to scratch the paint. The bolts came out, hydraulic lines disconnected. The wing light as a feather came off, tagged, carried like art. The engineering was beautiful, wasted on a kid who never pushed the car past the speed limit. By now, neighbors were emerging. Dog walkers, commuters, curious kids. Some kept walking, some filmed on their phones. An elderly woman from the neighborhood association brought me lemonade, whispered she'd waited years for someone to stand up to that family. A teen on a bike circled, asked if he could take photos. I told him sure, but to watch his back with the Kensingtons. He grinned, said entitled people deserved what they got. The hood came off next, front trunk storage exposed. Then the side skirts, low panels, making the car look sleeker. Each step, each part tagged, photographed, cataloged. Every piece carefully padded, placed in order. No damage, because professionals don't damage equipment, even when they dislike the owner. The Porsche was transforming from sports car to skeleton, from symbol of privilege to object lesson. By 10:30, I was ready for the exhaust. Crawling underneath, I set up my light-grabbed penetrating oil for the clamps slid under the Porsche on a mechanic's creeper. The exhaust hung in sections, headers, mid-pipes, titanium mufflers. Clamps were corroded from the coastal air, but they gave way after a soak. I loosened them, supported each section, headers off first, then mid-pipe, then the $15,000 titanium mufflers. Every part came off clean, laid on mats, tagged, photographed. I was just sliding out when I heard an expensive engine approaching Audi SUV. The son. I stood, wiped my hands, and watched him get out, AirPods and phone in hand. He took 3 steps toward his house before he noticed his car. His face went through confusion, disbelief, recognition, horror, then anger. Dude, what did you do? You can't just take apart my car. This is insane. This is illegal. I stayed calm, picked up my clipboard. Your car's blocked my property for 20 days. I warned you 14 times, including certified letters. I'm removing the obstruction using professional, non-destructive protocols. All components are preserved, cataloged, and stored. This is legal obstruction removal under property rights and maritime salvage law. He sputtered, actually sputtered like a cartoon. You're crazy. I'm calling the cops. And my mom? And my lawyer? He dialed, pacing voice rising. The cameras recorded everything. Neighbors watched. And the Porsche got lighter by the component. 15 minutes later, the mother showed up, Mercedes tires, squealing, phone already out, recording. The son stood at the edge of my driveway, gesturing at the car. She stormed over, voice high and sharp. Mr. Langston, this is destruction of property. This is vandalism. I'm calling the mayor, the police, the district attorney. I let her finish, then calmly handed her my documentation folder. Here's the municipal code. 20 days of photos showing your son blocking my driveway. 14 notifications. Police reports, a legal opinion from my attorney. Every part is removed by professional protocol. Nothing damaged. Everything inventoried and stored. All parts will be returned when you remove the car and pay storage fees, currently $625 at $25 per day. Her son exploded. Storage fees. You're charging us. You destroyed my car, I replied. Not destroyed, disassembled. And yes, storage fees are standard for professional component preservation, the same I charged yacht owners. Her face cycled red to purple to pale. We'll sue you for everything you have. My husband knows the mayor. You'll never work in this town again. You're finished. The police arrived before she could go further. Same officer as before, resigned expression. He stepped out, surveyed the scene, the Porsche skeleton, the neat rows of components, me in my vest with clipboard, the neighbors filming. Mr. Langston, explain what's happening here. His tone was neutral, but I saw the suppressed amusement in his eyes. I handed him the documentation folder, walked him through every point. Timeline, photos, certified letters, legal codes, attorney, letter, license, insurance, condition, report, inventory list. 10 minutes later, he finished. Turned to Dara. Ma'am, do you have documentation that Mr. Langston gave you permission to park here? She stared. Permission? We don't need permission. He's just a... She caught herself, but the implication hung heavy. The officer's tone hardened. Ma'am, this is private property. Your son's vehicle was parked here for 20 days without permission. Mr. Langston's methods are unusual, but from what I see, technically legal. He hasn't caused permanent damage. Everything's reversible and professionally stored. The son jumped in. But my car, look at it. The officer checked my inventory, then the Porsche. Son, it's disassembled, not destroyed. All the parts are right there, tagged, photographed, no visible damage. Your car's in better shape than most I see after a tow. He turned to me. Mr. Langston, I suggest you stop here. You've made your point. Ma'am, arrange for reassembly and removal. If you want to go to court, that's your right. From what I see, Mr. Langston has documented everything properly. Dira's voice dropped cold. We'll see what our attorney says. And the mayor. And the Harbor Commission. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Mr. Langston. She started making calls right there, pacing, voice urgent. The son stood staring at his Porsche, not processing. The officer handed me back my folder, told me to keep documenting, and left hiding a smile. I went back to work. Next came the interior. I wasn't going to let threats or stares stop me. Now the law and my files were solid and the whole neighborhood was watching. First out were the racing seats, carbon fiber buckets, $5,000 a piece if you could even get them. 4 bolts, each electrical connectors for the seat heaters and belt sensors. I handled them like eggs. Each seat out-tagged photoed set gently on the mat, logged by time and condition. Then I moved to the dashboard. The infotainment screen, navigation, Bluetooth, all that tech rich folks need to drive to brunch. Out it came labeled logged. The digital gauge cluster cost more than my first truck was next, followed by the steering wheel with its Alcantara wrap and paddle shifters the kid never used for more than Instagram likes. Airbag disconnected by the book. I wasn't about to risk a single spark or code. The crowd had grown by now 20, maybe 30 people, a few with folding chairs and pastries. An elderly neighbor explained to a cluster of newcomers how I'd tried every remedy, how the Kensingtons had mocked me, how the whole thing had been ignored until today. A couple teens took selfies with the gutted Porsche one, asked if this was going on YouTube. I told him probably, and to keep it respectful. By early afternoon, I'd pulled the center console pedals, shift knob, even the carpets. The inside looked like a crime scene, bare metal wiring harnesses coiled on the floor, sunlight glinting off empty bolt holes and factory stamps. It looked violated. That was the point. The son had violated my property for 20 days. Now his property was getting the professional treatment. Just after 2 o'clock, a news van pulled up. Someone must have tipped off the station. The reporter and her cameraman surveyed the scene with a kind of glee, then approached with a mic. "Can you tell us what's happening here, sir?" I kept working, explaining calmly I was exercising my property rights after exhausting all civil remedies. She asked if I worried about legal trouble. I told her my attorney had reviewed everything and that I'd documented every step to professional standards. When she asked what the family had said, I told her they were free to collect their parts after paying storage and removing the frame. That interview went viral before I even finished the interior. By dinner, someone had posted it online. It spread like wildfire commentary, ranging from hero to madman to wish I had the guts. The photo that really caught on was me, arms crossed in my surveyor vest behind the stripped Porsche, all the components laid out like an automotive anatomy lesson. The caption read, "Don't park where you're not wanted. Maritime salvage law, meet entitled Trust Fund Kids." It hit 50,000 shares in 6 hours. Yeah, that happened. At 5 p.m., Dira's meltdown was legendary. She'd spent the day calling every official she could: Mayor, Harbor Commission, Yacht Club Board, attorneys, PR firms. Nothing worked. My documentation was airtight, the action was legal, the damage was zero. She marched over with an attorney in tow, expensive suit, briefcase, the kind who bills by the minute. He tried to be reasonable. "We'll be filing suit in the morning. You've committed vandalism, trespass, a dozen other charges. I strongly advise you to stop." I handed him the folder. He read it, eyes narrowing, lips tight. When he finished, he looked at Dira and whispered something. She went pale. He turned to me. "Mr. Langston will be pursuing this in court, But your documentation is exceptional. We'll see you there. Professional courtesy between folks who know how evidence works. But Dira wasn't about courtesy. She turned on me phone, still recording, voice sharp as a fishhook. You immigrant boat worker. You don't belong here. You don't understand how things work. My family built this harbor. We've been yacht club for generations. You think you can humiliate us? Racist loud in front of half the neighborhood with their phones out. I'm not an immigrant. My family's been American 4 generations, but she'd made that assumption based on my last name and my calloused hands. Now it was out there. The silence that followed was heavy. Her own son looked away. The attorney closed his eyes in embarrassment. The elderly neighbor spoke up, voice strong. Dira Kensington, your grandfather would be ashamed of you. Other neighbors nodded. Working with your hands is honorable. He's a licensed professional. Wealth doesn't make you better. It was a reckoning decades overdue. I let it hang, then answered clear and calm. Mrs. Kensington, I've worked on boats worth more than your family's home. I've been trusted by people who could buy this whole block. Your son's Porsche is just another machine, and he parked it where it didn't belong. I removed it professionally. That's not humiliation, that's consequence. I turned back to my work. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a few more parts to pull before dark. She fled back to her house attorney and tow son, trailing behind. The neighbors broke into applause, scattered, awkward at first, then real. The news cameras caught the whole exchange. My phone buzzed with messages and calls. I ignored them. I had work to do. The engine cover came off last, the panel with the Porsche badge covering the flat 6. I photographed every bolt, every gasket, then stepped back and looked at the stripped car frame. Engine transmission glass doors still attached, special tools needed for that. Everything else, wheels, panels, interior exhaust, was organized in neat rows. 11 hours of work. My back ached, my knees throbbed. I was 57 and I'd just completed the most demanding survey job in years. But for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt peace. The driveway was mine again. The principal defended. That stripped Porsche was proof expensive toys don't grant immunity from consequences, not when you ignore property rights for 20 days. Monday morning, 3 days later, a process server handed me a lawsuit with an apologetic look. He'd probably seen the viral photos. Everyone had. The claim, $475,000 property damage, emotional distress defamation, because their reputation was hurt by the photo's loss of use of the car, punitive damages. Attached a restraining order request the judge had already denied. Plaintiff's vehicle was on defendant's property, the margin read. I called Simone, my attorney. She sounded almost giddy. Carver, bring everything. I loaded up 3 boxes of documentation and drove to her office. She spent 2 hours going through it, then said, "This is the most thorough client file I've seen in 30 years. They're going to regret this." But the lawsuit was just their opening move. The real assault came through social media and reputation. The mother hired a crisis PR firm, launched a coordinated campaign to paint me as dangerous, unstable. Multiple fake accounts proven later by digital forensics posted on forums, community pages, Google reviews. One claimed I'd assaulted her son. Another said I'd threatened children. Fake reviews popped up on my old business page claiming I'd damaged yachts. She even bought targeted ads that showed up whenever someone searched my name, filled with complaints. It was slick, and at first it worked. I lost consulting jobs, 3 yacht restorations canceled. The Harbor Commission opened an inquiry into my license. I spent weeks providing documentation, proving I'd done nothing wrong. The inquiry was dismissed, but it was time-consuming, stressful, and exactly what she'd intended. Some neighbors who'd supported me started to keep their distance, not because they believed her, but because picking a side against the most powerful HOA president in history was risky. My attorney hired a digital forensics team. $8,000 money I'd saved for a new boat motor now spent proving the campaign against me. They traced fake accounts to IP addresses at the Kensington's house, matched writing styles, documented paid ads purchased on family credit cards, screenshots, blockchain timestamps, the whole 9 yards. In discovery, the evidence crushed them. The judge granted our request for all messages about me, the HOA, the yacht club, social media. What came back was even worse: group chats about the boat worker problem, racist jokes about my background. I'm Norwegian American, but that didn't matter to her. Direct instructions to the PR firm to destroy his reputation, invoices for $15,000 to crisis managers, and most damning, the son's Instagram stories showing the Porsche deliberately parked in my driveway, mocking me, parked at the boat guy's place, LOL, old dude watching me, creepy, AF, his followers laughing right along. Depositions came 6 weeks after the lawsuit was filed. De'Ara went first, sitting across from my attorney, court reporter, and video rolling. Simone was surgical. How many warnings did Mr. Langston give? I don't recall specifics. Simone handed over the certified mail receipts. De'Ara's composure slipped. Those weren't serious. He was being dramatic. Then, did you create fake accounts to defame Mr. Langston? She denied it. Simone produced the IP logs. De'Ara went white. I'd like to speak to my attorney. The son's deposition was worse. He showed up in a hoodie, kept checking his phone until the judge told him to put it away. Simone asked, how many days did you park in Mr. Langston's driveway? I don't know, like a week, maybe 2. My garage was being renovated. Was it? We were planning renovations. Couldn't fit the Porsche because of my mom's stuff. So he chose my driveway rather than the marina. It was easier. It's just a driveway, not a big deal. Simone showed him his own Instagram posts. He went red. That was just for my friends. You have 8,000 followers. Silence. Income questions. What do you do? Entrepreneur app stuff. Crypto consulting. His parents gave him $15,000 a month. For what? He had no answer. Their attorney approached Simone after shell-shocked and floated a settlement drop. Everything pay storage, $10,000 for nuisance, a vague apology. I said no. I wanted all claims dropped, a public apology admitting trespass, and that I'd acted legally, payment of storage, reassembly, lost income, and legal fees. De'Ara resigned as HOA president. The son to 200 hours of maritime cleanup community service, $25,000 donation to a working waterfront charity, removal of all defamatory content, corrections posted. They refused. De'Ara would not be humiliated. Fine. Simone countersued for defamation, abuse of process, trespass, intentional infliction of emotional distress, $50,000 in damages, legal fees, storage, and all conditions as before. 6 weeks before trial, their lawyer called desperate. Drop it. Pay storage, $10,000, vague apology. I told Simone all or nothing. I wanted a jury to hear about the 20 days of trespass, the fake accounts, the entitled behavior. She said, this is going to trial. I said, good. 8 weeks later, the trial began. Judge Tamsin Merriweather presided, a retired Coast Guard JAG officer, 25 years of maritime law experience, zero tolerance for entitled behavior. The jury, 12 working-class people who looked like they'd never driven a $150,000 Porsche, and they probably hadn't. They were here to see facts, not wealth. The mother's attorney started trying to paint me as obsessive, unhinged, dangerous. He showed photos of the disassembled Porsche, my meticulous notes, the cameras. Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. He took apart a car, he said, trying for outrage. The jury barely blinked. They were listening, but skepticism was creeping in. Then Simone took over. Calm, precise, surgical. She presented the timeline, the photographs, the 147 pages of condition reports, video from 4 camera angles, certified letters, police reports. She brought in an expert maritime surveyor, a colleague of mine, who testified that my protocols were textbook perfect, exceeding any standard expected for professional salvage or survey work. Digital forensics came next, proving the mother's coordinated defamation campaign, fake accounts paid ads messaging, texts showing deliberate racially charged assumptions about me, photos and timestamps proving the son knew exactly what he was doing. The story of entitlement laid bare. The mother took the stand. Cross-examination was brutal. She faltered, contradicted herself, denied warnings that were documented. She admitted the Instagram posts, the harassment, even the racist assumptions. The courtroom collectively leaned in when the audio played of her yelling at me, calling me an immigrant boat worker who didn't belong. Some jurors visibly recoiled. The son looked pale out of his depth. He eventually had to admit under oath that he ignored multiple warnings, that his garage wasn't being renovated, as claimed that he'd mocked me publicly, and confirmed the $15,000 monthly allowance from his parents. By day 3, their attorney looked defeated. My testimony was calm, factual. I explained 20 days of trespass, the certified letters, the professional non-destructive disassembly protocols. No anger, just meticulous clarity. When the judge reviewed my documentation, he spent 20 minutes poring over it, then looked up and said, "Exceptional work, Mr. Langston, Coast Guard standard." The jury deliberated 90 minutes. Verdict: all claims against me dismissed. All my counterclaims upheld. Damages awarded: $5,000 trespass, $35,000 defamation, $15,000 abuse of process, $18,000 emotional distress, $27,000 legal fees. Total judgment: $100,000 plus court orders requiring public apology, removal of defamatory content, payment of storage fees and reassembly costs. Justice methodical, complete, and visible. The judge addressed the Kensingtons directly. "Mrs. Kensington, Mr. Kensington, you demonstrated entitlement, disrespect, and malice. Your son trespassed repeatedly. You enabled him. When confronted with consequences, you lied, defamed, and tried to destroy a man's reputation. This behavior is unacceptable. Property rights, documentation, professionalism, matter, and wealth does not place anyone above the law or basic decency. Let this judgment stand as precedent." 3 months later, change was tangible. De'Ara resigned from the HOA presidency. Their house went on the market, sold at a loss, recognized in local and national news. The son's Porsche, reassembled professionally, was sold for less than market value. The new HOA president was Mr. Baxter Stroud, the retired sailing instructor who had cheered me on. Fairness returned. New bylaws emphasized equal enforcement regardless of wealth. The culture shifted, more working families felt welcome, fewer yacht club power plays, boundaries respected. My reputation recovered and then grew. Yacht restoration clients returned apologetic. New clients sought me specifically for my precision and integrity. I spoke at maritime law conferences about the creative application of salvage principles, got interviewed for Professional Mariner magazine. Settlement money went largely to charity supporting scholarships for maritime tradespeople. I kept enough for expenses and an emergency fund. Money had never been the point. 6 months later, a young family moved into the former Kensington mansion. They introduced themselves within a day, bringing cookies and assurances. We respect boundaries. Their kids were fascinated by my workshop. I found myself teaching the 6-year-old daughter about boat building on Saturday mornings while the parents worked carefully, respecting each other's property. The neighborhood felt lighter, freer, restored. At sunset, I stood in my driveway space, clear again. Garage door open, tools gleaming, Lana's easel catching the evening light as it should. Harbor visible beyond the rooftops. Boats at anchor, masts silhouetted against the sky. Kids played street hockey, careful around driveways, parents teaching respect for boundaries. Elderly widow tending her garden waved. The sailing instructor walked his dog, stopped to chat about restoration projects. Peace returned, not silence of submission, but of vindication. I thought back to the 20 days that led to all this, the frustration, the planning, the methodical disassembly, the legal battle. All of it boiled down to something simple: dignity. Your property is your property, boundaries matter. And standing up professionally, systematically matters, even against wealth connections or social standing. Lana would have been proud not of the conflict, but of the refusal to let someone take what wasn't theirs. Of maintaining professionalism when they tried to paint me the villain. Of proving that working-class competence, diligence, and documentation can dismantle privilege as surely as it dismantles machines. The driveway became a symbol not of parking, but of dignity defended. The right to boundaries, to demand respect, even from people who think money exempts them. The house quiet, porch light, glowing echo of the day fading into the sea breeze. The workshop smelled of varnish and salt air, the same air that once carried Lana's laughter as she painted here. I picked up the toy boat I'd been building for the neighbor's daughter. Sanded, varnished, finished. Across the street, porch lights flicked on, kids' laughter carried. A world rebuilt not through grand gestures, but through insisting that wrong things can be made right. Peace doesn't arrive, it's made. Hammered, sanded, sealed. Sometimes the smallest battles matter most because they're about dignity, and dignity is non-negotiable. Not for sale, not for rent, not subject to HOA approval or yacht club membership. Earned, defended, preserved. My driveway was empty, my garage accessible, my boundary clear, and that was everything.